So welcome to the December 2021 installment of Rainbow Covenant Haiku and Art in 3 parts. I am Haijin Sharifa Bernice Meytung, and I'm happy to be with you today to continue with our experience of haiku poetry, original haiku poetry, um, original visual arts. So we're going to begin with the first haiku. And for the most part, there are 3 pieces. There's 3 haiku and together with 3 pieces of artwork. 2 of them will be in the form of abstract art using canvas and acrylic or watercolor, or in this case, collage, where there's also pieces of other things going on. And then there's usually also 1 piece that is some sort of graphic illustration. So this first one, let's just jump right in to this first piece, Farewell to Autumn. A faltering step, a rush to a season's end, autumn is no more. A faltering step, a rush to a season's end, autumn is no more. This first of the 3 haiku that we're going to experience together here, the thread that runs through all 3 of the haiku today has to do with the end of things, also projection, also seeing things in perspective. All 3 were written during the trials of defendants who were accused of infringement of civil rights on their victims, actually. And so during this time, these 3 poems were written. And as I said, they reflect not just the end of the season, but also for some it might be the end of a cycle, or you may experience it as, or colloquially, the end of an age. Some folks may experience it that way. For others, it's a continuation of what has always been. So for them, it becomes more about perspective, how they're seeing things, how they're experiencing things. The piece here, which is a canvas board, 9x12 with acrylic paints, is a collage. And because I also work with the idea of engaging with nature, engaging with our environment, and exactly where we are right now with that, with our relationship with the environment, and how that can be mitigated and how that can shift and change into a more holistic space, and also just reflecting on what it has been. And so here, there's pieces of the Scotty's tissue box, which you associate using tissues either to dry tears or in times of illness where you may have to blow your nose and you need tissues. And then there's also the idea of branding Scotty's tissues as opposed to Kleenex or some other, or a generic brand. The way in which these corporations whose brands we utilize, how are they engaging with the environment, and what effect can we have on the way that they engage with the environment? So also it's about our responsibility. A faltering step, a rush to a season's end, autumn is no more. Going forward with piece number 2, the verdicts. And here we are situated right in that space where this was written while the jury was being presented the evidence on the two cases, and were about to go into deliberation to come back and deliver their verdict as to whether or not they felt that the folks who were being accused of the crimes, if they were ultimately to be held accountable for those crimes. In these two prominent cases, the end result was that one defendant was not held accountable, so they were acquitted. In the other case, the defendants were held accountable. They were actually found guilty of their crimes for the most part, and are awaiting sentencing. We all must witness brute force and ragged edges. Who is truly free? We all must witness brute force and ragged edges. Who is truly free? The backdrop of this slide is the art piece, the verdicts, and it is actually also a canvas board. It's a 9x12 canvas board. And the imagery that you see, with the exception of the circles are actually part of the illustration coming from the slide. Everything else, these rather ragged movements here, which remind me almost of, like this reminds me of a screw, almost like, screws and things that I associated with being jagged, that has those edges. At the same time, the way that they're coming up out of here, they also remind me actually of some sort of growth, of coming up out of the earth also somehow, or out of the bottom of the ocean. Also, some of these shapes here have that element also. So it's this energy of movement, but also of there being jagged spaces in our movement, and which is something that that no one is free from experiencing. In Buddhism, samsara is the overall experience of humanity on this planet, and it's that struggle, it's that suffering, it's that moving forward but through the overlaying tragedies and grief and loss and suffering and birth and death and all of those experiences, which we all, if we're here on this planet, we're going to witness them. And you might have someone who says, oh, my life was just absolutely perfect. I grew up, had a perfect childhood, my life is so perfect now. You may have someone who has that experience of everything was just wonderful, yet and still they're walking on this planet, right? Amongst all of us whose lives may not be perfect. And so they witness that. So that becomes part of their experience as well. So it is. We all must witness brute force and ragged edges. Who is truly free? And our final piece, our third piece in 3 parts, and this one actually has 3 panels to it. This is the graphic illustration. As I said earlier, there's always in our Rainbow Covenant, there's always going, hopefully, there will always be a graphic illustration piece in addition to the painted pieces. Backyard view. We live in solids. We live in empty spaces where thoughts crowd the view. We live in solids. We live in empty spaces where thoughts crowd the view. This was initially a haiku that was written to an exercise of just looking out the back window and seeing what I saw. This is not what I see out my back window, but in taking the haiku from that and then moving it into a graphic space, it became immediately more of a two-dimensional experience for me. So I began to think about, okay, what about city space in general, urban space in general, and what's going on in these spaces. But again, from more of a two-dimensional experience, not from like a three-dimensional or four-dimensional experience, human experience, but more really more subject object. If I am the subject and the city landscape is the object, what is that backyard view? What is that perspective? We live in solids. We live in empty spaces where thoughts crowd the view. So there it is. There you have it. That is our covenant experience for December. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you all again next year in 2022 in January for our next experience in 3 parts of my original haiku and my original artwork. And I am Haijin Sharifa Bernice Meytung. Be well at the end of this year and come good into the new year. Until then, peace.